Hello, this is Jeff Cobb, Managing Director of Consulting for Tagoras. And in this presentation, I'm going to discuss three axioms or principles of pricing that I think are essential to understand if you want to approach pricing with the right mindset and ultimately do it effectively. As I highlight each of these, I challenge you to think about how each one impacts, whether positively or negatively, the way that your organization approaches pricing. The first of these is that price really is about perception more than just about anything else. As buyers, we really aren't as rational as we'd like to think we are when we make our purchasing decisions. We're influenced by any number of factors that are unrelated to how much an item actually costs in hard dollar terms. These include brand, the way it looks, what our peers think of it, to how it compares with competing products, and that's just to name a few. And that's not really a bad thing. It just reflects that there are many different ways and many different reasons for how we get value out of a product. The critical point for you, as someone who's involved in setting prices, is that it's possible to influence perception. So consider, for example, what BMW has done in the automobile market. The picture on the screen here shows a top-of-the-line Honda Accord on the left and a BMW M6 Grand Coupe on the right. Now, these cars don't look dramatically different, but the Honda starts at around $30,000 and the BMW M6 starts at around $110,000. Now, there's really nothing about the underlying cost that's anywhere near different enough to justify this kind of price difference. And you can tell me all you want about German engineering, but really the difference is a matter of how buyers perceive themselves, the product, and themselves in relation to the product. And these types of perceptual differences are by no means limited to high-ticket luxury items. Think, for example, of the impact that Starbucks has had on the price of a commodity item like coffee just during our lifetimes. I'd argue that both Starbucks and BMW have spent a lot of time thinking about the experience of driving, of drinking coffee, and then investing in relatively low cost but high impact details that go along with that experience and help change the perception of it. And arguably any organization can do that. Now, one key lesson I would urge you to take away from all of this is that there really is no magic answer to what the price is for a particular product, and there is no formula. It's not a matter of cost plus a certain level of margin. It's not a matter of just looking strictly at what the competitors do, at least if you truly want to optimize your prices for maximizing net revenue. There's simply too many variables, and perception is one of the biggest variables. As we turn to the next axiom, I challenge you to think for just a moment about what you know about how your products are perceived, and think for a minute about what you might be able to change about that. So, moving on to the next essential point about pricing. Price is perception as one key factor. Another is that price drives profit. Now, I recognize that many of the people watching this presentation will be from nonprofit organizations, but even nonprofits generally want to maximize the net revenue that they earn from their products. This creates funds that can be reinvested back into other parts of the organization where maintaining positive net revenue may be much harder. When it comes to selling a product or service, there are really three key variables that impact net revenue: volume, cost, including both fixed and variable cost, and price. Out of the three of these, price is by far the most powerful when it comes to the impact that a change, whether positive or negative, can have on your net revenues. So what are we talking about there? Consider, for example, what the chart on this page illustrates, where we're going to start with a price and then change it. So if we look at this, we'll see that a 10% increase in price for a product will increase profit by 100%. At the same time, if we were to, instead of changing price, change volume and say we're going to increase the volume of sales of a product by 10%, that 10% change only results in a 40% increase in overall profit. Now, if you look at the cost side of the equation, if you cut your variable cost by 10%, you're only going to increase profit by 60% as compared to 100% that you got from increasing price. And then finally, if you decrease your fixed cost by 10%, you're only going to increase your profit by 30%. So out of these levers that you can pull, price is the one that is going to have by far the most impact on the profit at the end of the day. And so, this is a simplified example, hopefully to make the concept as easy to digest as possible. You can pause and look at these numbers and make sure you understand what's going on here. But this same dynamic holds across pretty much any scenario you want to plug into this type of chart. Increasing price, even by a small amount, is always a powerful driver of profit. In fact, research shows that on average, a 1% price increase increases profit by around 11%. Now, here's a key takeaway. For those of you who are thinking about whether to raise price, you don't actually have to raise price very much to have a significant impact. In fact, you may be able to get good results with a price raise that your members or customers barely even notice. On the other hand, cutting prices is something you do have to be careful with, and the chart on this page is made to illustrate that point. In this case, we take the price of a $100 product and we cut it by 10% with the idea that that's going to help increase the volume of sales. If the price is lower, people are going to buy more. And so let's assume that that in fact works, and that, say, we're able to increase volume by 15%. So in this case, you'd end up selling 150 more of whatever the product is. Let's say it's registrations for an event. So you do end up with somewhat more revenue, but if you look down below, you're also going to increase your cost to at least some degree whenever you increase volume. So increased volume is going to lead to some increase in variable cost. And in the end, in this case, net revenue actually declines. In fact, in this case, you would actually have to sell 20% more to make up for a 10% price reduction. Now, this will vary from product to product, and there are obvious cases where it's not really an issue. For example, with digital products where the variable cost may be close to zero or may be zero. In those cases, if cutting price will in fact drive higher volume, you can make an argument that it's worth doing it, at least on some occasions. But with many products, place-based education offerings, for example, the issue of margins declining when your costs go up and you don't have sufficient volume to make up for that is very real. And of course, keep in mind that cutting price can have other effects besides just the hard financial impact. We talked earlier about price really being about perception, and certainly price cuts can impact how you are perceived in the market, how both your products and your organization is perceived, and usually that perception is going to be negative. So you really want to be careful with cutting price, both from the standpoint of it potentially damaging profit, but also potentially damaging that very important factor, perception. Finally, the third axiom is that pricing can and should be very strategic. It shouldn't be something that you just come up with at the end after you've figured out everything else. Really, pricing factors very much into how you set your strategic objectives and what those are. For example, you might be aiming for penetration of a new market. You might be trying to expand your market share within an existing market. You might be trying to change your positioning within the marketplace, or differentiate yourself more dramatically from your competitors than you have in the past. Any of these take into account much more information than simply what your products cost. They recognize, the actions of the competition, the preferences of the consumer, and the potential power of your brand. So how you manage price is inherently linked to how you manage your strategy and achieve these kinds of objectives. One example I've come across recently that helps to illustrate this and is kind of fun is the Barclay Prime Steakhouse in Philadelphia, which used pricing really as a way to differentiate itself and stand out in its market. As you can imagine, there's a lot of competition among steakhouses in a major city like Philly. So as a way of standing out, Barclay took a related Philly tradition, the Philly cheesesteak, and decided to create an ultra high-priced premium version of it. The sandwich, which features Kobe beef and truffles and a bakery roll and all sorts of other high-end ingredients, is priced at $100. And that makes it a real novelty, but it's also a novelty that's very much in line with the image the restaurant wants to present. It's created, as you might imagine, a great deal of word of mouth. It sells well. People often order it as an appetizer and share it. And of course, it attracts people who just want to say they've had the experience of the $100 cheesesteak. So all in all, it was a very strategic move in which price played a very big role. I'd argue that a secondary impact here is that the high price for a cheesesteak sandwich creates what's called an anchoring sort of effect. People are fascinated by the product and the $100 price tag, and once they have that $100 price tag in mind for a Philly cheesesteak, $50 for a filet mignon seems like a pretty good deal. In your own world, I challenge you to think about the impact of having, for instance, some very high-end premium type products like this on your menu or in your portfolio of products. How could you use pricing in this way to really differentiate or position yourself in a different way? So that wraps up the three axioms of pricing: that pricing is about perception, that pricing is a driver of profit, and that pricing really can and should be very strategic. These are all concepts that I talk about certainly in my book, Leading the Learning Revolution, so I encourage you to check out the book and also the accompanying podcast. And I also encourage you to contact me if you have questions about pricing. If you're looking for help with your own pricing challenges, you can contact me by any of the ways that are on the screen here. And I encourage you to visit the Tagoras site at tagoras.com/resources, and you'll find there we've got a lot of different resources related to organizations in the business of continuing education, professional development, and lifelong learning, and certainly those include a number of resources related to pricing.